Hello YouTube, Captain Mac here, and we are going to take a look at something. First of all, you know what, let me just apologize for not getting to this a little bit quicker. I put out my Reading Approach Charts 101 tutorial, had a lot of good information on there, and I think I covered the bulk of this information. However, admittedly, there were a few things that I was unclear or unaware about, especially in this profile section and some of the information we're looking at right here. And so that's what I wanted to get back to, and that's what we're going to do here right now. That being said, I certainly meant to get to it a little quicker, and I simply did not get the opportunity. Okay, so there's my apologies out of the way. Now, let me just, I want to clarify something here, okay? I am a real-world pilot, but I'm not an instrument-rated pilot, and I don't know everything. I know it's hard to imagine. I know. There's very few things I don't know. I'm all wise. No, just kidding. No, there's plenty of things I don't know, and you know I like to learn them as I go. And in fact, there's a few of my subscribers who clearly have some more information about certain things than I do. And when I don't know something, they're leaving comments down in the comments section that I really appreciate. So just a quick shout out to Shaker and to Kilo. You guys are doing a fantastic job. I really appreciate the feedback I'm getting from you guys. It definitely helps me, and it makes me a better pilot, both in the real world and simulation world. So definitely appreciate that. That being said, this is not going to be a very long tutorial. I'm going to go through this really quick because this really is just sort of a caveat to my Reading Approach Charts 101, and then I want to get into a few other tutorials such as blah, 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 my mind doesn't want to work, reading star charts and stuff like that. So that being said, and without further ado, let's jump right in here. So we talked a little bit about this real quick last time. I really want to get into it here, but not to take too long. I want you to know that I am looking at, now I'm going to do a no-kidding Lido charts tutorial here pretty soon. So thumbs up, if you want to see that, throw it down in the comments for me. Say, yeah, I want to see a real legitimate Lido charts tutorial. And the reason I ask, because I'm holding a portion of the manual in front of me here, and that's right, a manual for these charts, and it happens to be 109 pages long, and that's just for the symbols and stuff like that. Now that being said, some of you are going, well, no wonder people hate Lido charts. No, that's not why. In fact, the more people I'm talking to now, the more people seem to like these. And I don't blame them. I think they're fantastic, but we'll talk about that later. You want to see a good Lido charts tutorial? Like, no kidding, not just approach charts or whatever, but Lido charts, all the little ins and outs of Lido charts, please leave it down in the comments. If I get enough takers, then that's what we're going to do. Now that being said, I am looking here at one of the pages from that manual, and the first thing we're going to talk about the runway, little runway view right over here. And just as a heads up, there are 20 different bits of information available right here. It probably doesn't look like it right now as you're looking at it, but there are 20 different bits of information. And I'm going to go through this relatively quick because we don't have all of those things on here anyway. So we don't really have to worry about that so much. But just going down the list, runway approach lights, which there really aren't any for this runway. But so you'll notice some Lido charts have approach lights here, and there's various configurations. I'm counting right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Looks like 9 different configurations that you can have for the approach lighting system here in front of the threshold, and then at the threshold, of course, there's actually add one more. So what is that? 10. Yeah, so plenty you could have there, right? There's also you can have information on centerline lights, which there aren't any here, and that's accurate. You know, Phoenix Sky Harbor doesn't have centerline lights on their runways. I don't know why that is actually, but they don't have them. So there you go. Enough said about that. But there are different configurations for centerline lights as well, and you can, including how far apart they are. So let's move on to that. The next couple are centerline lights. Of course, this is the runway designator, and I'm just going down the list, so it may seem like I'm doing this a little weird, but this is like going right down their list of what's what here. So this is the runway here. It's runway 26, and then the edge light spacing and intensity. Okay, so high, medium, low, or variable, which is HML or HL or ML. So HL is high or low, so it's a variable intensity of the lights there, and their spacing is 60 meters apart. So that's what this information is right here, and this also has to do with runway edge lighting, which we're starting to get into that. So non-standard edge lights would just be the white ones here. Okay, and then the yellow here is standard edge lights with a yellow caution zone. So this means there's 600 meters or less left on the runway. So at 1/3 of total runway length left is where the yellow lights start, and that's what that's telling us right there. A lot of information, isn't there? This G right here means that the surface area of the runway is grooved. So good deal there. The landing distance available beyond the threshold is this space right here, or this number right here, 3,502 meters. And let's see, we don't have, the next one would be non-standard centerline lights, but again, we don't have those. The PAPI, that's the red and white lights over here. There's a couple different types. There's PAPI, there's VASI. There's actually several different types. But here in the US, we only use two types, PAPI or VASI. PAPI lights is precision approach path indicator. That's the 4 lights side by side. 2 white and 2 red means you're on glide slope. And then VASI is the visual approach slope indicator. And that would be 2 lights here and 2 lights here. Still, 2 white and 2 red means on glide slope. But there are other configurations as well. You can have 3-bar VASI, 2-bar VASI, T-bar VASI. And all of those can be displayed on these charts as well. What else? Let's keep moving on here. Runway end identifier light is these guys right here. So it's just telling us that's the end of the runway. And so this chart is telling us what's on there, right? So this tells us that those runway end identifier lights are available for runway 26. And then we have our slope information in percentage. So the average runway slope as well as the touchdown zone slope are provided. A negative slope is indicated for downward slopes, as in a negative 0.2 or something like that. Right here, negative 0.2%. So it's a downward slope, and then a positive slope obviously would be a positive number. So that's what this is telling us right here. And then our touchdown zone, there's no slope. So it's flat in our touchdown zone, which would be right in this area here. So that's nice to know. Let's see what else here. Like I said, I'm just going right down the list, guys. Only a couple more things that we really need to worry about. First of all, there are no runway zone touchdown zone lights on this, but the 46 here gives us the width in meters. So it's a 46 meter wide runway. Okay, so that's basically going down the information right here. That doesn't include this 3 degrees right here. What this is this means that if you're on glide slope, it's a 3-degree glide slope. There it is right there, 3 degrees, 3 degrees. That's what it's telling us, and that could vary ever so slightly. For example, it says here that the localizer is within 3.05 degrees. That's left and right, of course. But that's what the 3 means right there. This is the airport elevation, and this is the standard airport pressure in hectopascals, and I'm not sure what 41 HPA translates to in inches of mercury. You know, we use 2.9 or 902, so on and so forth. That's inches of mercury. Hectopascals is a different setting, and that's where you get your 1013 and stuff like that. So let's see what else here. That's going to move us into our profile. Now, I mentioned this last time, but only briefly, and I said it didn't make sense to be at 4 miles from the runway threshold and 1,820 feet because the elevation at the touchdown zone is 1,135 feet. So if you do the math, that's only about 700 feet above the ground at 4 miles. Here's where I was wrong. This is where I made a mistake. Let's scroll up top here for just a second. Okay. And in this box right here, we know this is an ILS, right? It's an ILS or localizer runway 26. Here's the frequency, right? And this is the name of the ILS indicator, ICWJ. Now I don't know Morse code, so I don't know if this means ICWJ. Maybe it does. If you're a Morse code guy, look that up for me. Tell me, does this ... dash dot dash dot dot dash dash dot dash dash dash, does that mean, is that ICWJ? I could look it up, but I'm not going to right now. The point is ICWJ is basically the name of our ILS frequency, right? Okay, so let's go back down here. DICWJ, what does that mean? That means distance from ICWJ, okay? So when I am 4 miles from ICWJ, I should be at 1,820 feet. Now you're saying to yourself, that still doesn't make sense. 1,135 feet is, I mean, that's the runway elevation, right? So that's still only, you know, just shy of 700 feet above the ground. Ah, but here's the key, and this is the one thing, one of those few things I don't particularly like here. If you went to a standard Jeppesen chart, it actually shows you specifically where ICWJ is, and you will discover that it's on this side, this end of the runway. Now, we do have some indication. Distance 2.1 ICWJ is at this end of the runway. The runway's 2.1 miles long, right? So when we are 4 miles from ICWJ here, right? That's not 4 miles from this threshold. It's 4 miles from the opposite end of the runway. So I was correct when I thought that this is our altitudes based on our distance from the localizer or from the ILS, right? Or from the runway. However you want, whatever terminology you want to use, it's distance from ICWJ, which is our ILS indicator, our beacon, which is at this end of the runway. So when I'm 4 miles from this end of the runway, I'm actually 2.1 miles from the runway. And to be at about 700 feet at 2.1 miles would make sense depending on my speed, right? Okay. That's where these categories come in down here. And I looked them up, and let me pull that information up here real quick. And I will show you, well, I won't show you, but I'll explain to you what these are right here. So before getting into everything down here, real quick, I want to cover this portion right here so that we can just get that out of the way, and then I'll talk about all this information over here. All right, this is the category of aircraft. Basically, there are, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories of aircraft, A through E, okay? And it has to do with the speed of the aircraft, specifically their approach speeds, all right? So, Category C aircraft has approach speed greater than or well, basically the approach speed is 121 knots, greater than 121 knots, and less than 141 knots. That's the information I have on that. That's probably slightly generalized, but basically between 120 and 140 knot approach speed is a Category C aircraft. A Category D aircraft is going to be a little bit faster, basically between 140 and 166 knots. That's Category D. So you'd be looking essentially your 737s, Airbus A320s, maybe even 321s and stuff. Those are your Category C. And then if you've got larger aircrafts like an MD-11, which do fly into Phoenix. This is a Phoenix chart still. MD-11s or 747s. There is some 747s flying into Phoenix. Those are Category D aircraft. They have a slightly faster approach speed. So that's what C and D represent over here. And then, of course, there are other categories. Category A has a speed less than 91 knots, so your Cessnas. And you could even say your King Air, because your King Air approach speed is about 90 knots. So that should be a Category A. Category B would be between 91 and 121 knots. And then we've already talked about C and D. And then Category E is the fastest, which only includes certain military aircraft. You know, your F-16s, F-16s and stuff. They have a higher approach speed because they're little jet aircraft. So that's what these two boxes are representing here, is the category of aircraft. And for Phoenix, there are only the two categories, C and D aircraft. So with all that in mind, let's talk about the rest of the information in this box down here. And then we'll bounce back up and we'll cover a little bit more information here and then be done, because this is really just sort of an add-on to my how to read approach charts tutorial from earlier. So first of all, this is our runway right here. Okay, and it's there, it's up top. Basically, they want to make sure you know which runway you're flying into here, right? We've got measuring units are feet and statute miles. That's an important bit of information right there. And let's see what else. You've got your approach type, Cat 1 or localizer. So a Cat 1, that's the ILS. It's a Cat 1 ILS. So a Cat 3 ILS, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. A Cat 3 ILS allows you to basically fly, it's a full auto land. So the weather does not see, still having trouble talking. The weather does not allow for minimums, and what I mean by that is, for example, here we've got our minimum our minimums information, which is, and I'm just hopping back over my information over here to make sure I give you the proper information. Here we go. So it's the minimum descent height. Or decision height. So in this case, it's 260 feet above the ground. This is AGL now, not MSL. So at 260 feet above the ground is your minimum descent height or minimum decision altitude, depending on which terminology you want to use. And you must have 0.88 miles visibility. And then this information here would be your height above the ground. So 1135 and 260, does that equal 1390? Pretty close. Not quite. It's off by 5 feet there, but you get the point. So that's what this information is telling you right here. If you're flying just the localizer, okay, Cat 1 is the ILS. It's not a Cat 3. It's only a Cat 1. If you're flying the Cat 1, your minimum decision altitude or minimum descent height is 260 feet and 0.88 miles visibility, and that's for both C and D category of aircraft. If you're flying just the localizer, that means you're not using the glide slope. Your minimum descent altitude or minimum decision height, they're the same thing, is 450 feet AGL or 1580 feet MSL, and you must have 1.38 miles visibility. And it changes for the category D aircraft with the same descent height, but you must have 1.5 miles of visibility. So that's what this is telling us right here. This is telling us there's new terminal procedures for circling. We're not going to get into those right now because that requires some other information that's not directly related to this chart at the moment. And for circling, this is our information right here. This is circle to land, by the way. So if I want to land on runway 26, but if I'm using the runway 26 approach but circling to land, basically a category C aircraft is 790 feet is my minimum decision height with 2.25 miles visibility. And then if it's a category D aircraft, it's 1,090 feet. This is again AGL and 3 miles visibility. That's what this information is here. The reason I said we're not going to fully address this because this is new to the procedures, but if you want to fully understand the circling, the terminal procedures for circling, you have to look up some other information as well, which includes recent NOTAMs and stuff like that. We're not going to dive into that right now because, God, we'll be here all day, and I already talked too much. I know some guys say they like the length of my videos, and there's probably some others who go, holy crap, this takes forever. So last thing I want to do real quick, just cover this profile view here. We've talked about it a little bit last time, and we've got our minimum altitudes, 4,000 feet in Tel Jigal, 3,000 feet at Prune, and so on. Okay, this is our minimum decision altitude right here based on this information. And one of the little bit of additional information we have here is if we look at this is our ground speed, 120, 140, 160, and it tells us what our descent rate should be in feet per minute and how long it should take to get from 7.7 miles ICWJ, okay, which is, let's see, it's 11.1 at Jigal, it's 7.7 right here at Prune. So from 7.7, or from Prune, my brain is not working today, from Prune to your missed approach point, which is right here. This is the missed approach point. At 120 knots, you want to descend at 650 feet per minute to maintain that 3-degree glide slope, and it'll take you about 2 minutes and 48 seconds to cover that distance from Prune to the missed approach point. At 160 knots, it takes you 2 minutes and 6 seconds. That's the information right here. And then I think I mentioned this in the last one. This is our go-around information. So if we have to execute a missed approach, we would fly at 258 degrees and up. We'll automatically climb to 2,500 feet and then make a right turn to heading 030. Intercept a 336 radial from PXR to event, climbing up to 5,000 feet and then hold at event. That's what that is right there. Okay. So I think that covers all the information that I didn't get to or wasn't absolutely certain of in my 101 tutorial. So it was a basic tutorial, and a 102 really is as well. This really just wanted to add some information. So again, if you want a tutorial that's a no kidding, all out, hey, this is Lido charts and how they work, I'd be more than happy to provide that for you. Keep in mind, there are 109 pages of information here, so it could be a relatively long tutorial. I'd be more than happy to try and put some little links to various points in there, but I'm not going to put that together unless you guys actually want it. So enough about that. Last thing, just a little disclaimer here. Read the bottom. It says this chart is part of Navigraph charts and is intended for flight simulation use only. Do not use this for real-world flight, please, and thank you. So enough is enough. That's my 102, just an add-on. I appreciate your time as always, and please, if this video was helpful to you, especially as an add-on to the 101, give it a thumbs up down below, and please subscribe to my channel. I have nothing else for you. If you have nothing else for me, oh yeah, you can't talk to me on here. So leave something down in the comments if you got something else for me. Other than that, you folks have a fantastic day.